Pachycephalosaurus was not the biggest dinosaur. It didn't have sharp claws or giant teeth, but what it had was a weapon unlike any other. A thick, solid dome of bone on top of its skull, almost 20 centimeters thick. That dome made it one of the toughest creatures of its time. Didn't need to roar or chase. One hit with its head could end a fight in seconds. These dinosaurs lived in groups, and dominance was everything. They didn't fight to kill. They fought to prove who was stronger. Two males would lower their heads, take a few steps back, and then run full speed toward each other. The sound of impact was so loud it could be heard across the valley. The winner earned the right to lead, the right to choose food, mates, and resting spots. It wasn't about destruction. It was about survival through respect. Despite the powerful head, Pachycephalosaurus had a surprisingly light body. It could move fast, using its tail to balance as it charged forward. Its legs were built for running, not crushing. So even though it looked heavy, it was actually quick, almost like a small armored athlete of the dinosaur world. Scientists once thought it used its dome just for defense, but new research suggests it also used it to communicate. The bumps and small horns on the skull were unique to each individual, like fingerprints. Each head was a message. This is me, this is my power. It was a world of silent communication. No words, just force and posture. The females, on the other hand, were more cautious. They avoided direct fights and often stayed in the background, guarding the young. The young Pachycephalosaurs practiced small headbutts, learning balance before strength. It wasn't just instinct. It was part of growing up in a world where the head ruled everything. Pachycephalosaurus looked like a creature built only for fighting. But inside that thick skull, it had more than just bone. It had brains, instincts, and surprising intelligence for its time. It wasn't a mindless beast. It watched, remembered, and reacted. This dinosaur lived in small herds, usually families or tight groups that moved together through open forests and rocky hills. They didn't wander without reason. They followed a pattern: water, food, safety. Every member had a role. The stronger males guarded the sides, while the smaller ones stayed in the middle. The females led the young, teaching them how to feed on ferns and low plants. Unlike hunters like Allosaurus or Velociraptor, Pachycephalosaurus didn't need blood to prove strength. Its world was about discipline and balance. When danger appeared, maybe a predator like a young T-Rex or a raptor pack, they didn't scatter in fear. They circled up, heads facing out, ready to ram anything that came close. It was teamwork, and it worked. A single hit from that skull could break a bone or crush a rib. Predators learned quickly to think twice. Scientists still argue about whether they really hit each other head-on, or just use their heads to push and wrestle. But one thing is sure, they didn't fight without purpose. They fought to train, to dominate, and to prepare for real danger. Their domes had scars, not just from enemies, but from life itself. When night came, the herd would rest close together. They weren't as massive as sauropods, so they had to stay alert. Even resting, their bodies were built for reaction. A quick turn, a sprint uphill, or a headbutt in the dark if needed. They didn't sleep long. Every sound, every vibration in the ground could mean something. They survived because they never lost focus. Pachycephalosaurus wasn't the biggest or the fastest, but it was patient, aware, and strong in its own way. It's not always size that makes a dinosaur legendary. Sometimes it's strategy. And this dome-headed defender had plenty of it. When two Pachycephalosaurs met, it wasn't always peaceful. They lived by rules, silent but strict ones. Every herd had a leader, and that leader was not chosen by chance. He earned his place by proving his strength, not through killing, but through controlled power. The challenge began with posture. Two males faced each other, standing tall, tails straight for balance. Their eyes locked. They began to circle, testing, reading the other's moves. Sometimes they didn't even need to fight. The weaker one simply stepped back, accepting defeat. But when both refused to yield, it became a real show of force. They took several steps back, scratched the ground, and then charged. The sound, a deep, sharp crack, echoed across the plain. Dust rose, birds scattered, and the herd froze in silence. They didn't fight long. A few hits were enough to decide. The loser would lower his head, step aside, and walk away slowly. There was no revenge, no second round. It was nature's version of respect, simple and final. Their skull domes weren't just armor. They were built for this. thick bone, strong muscles in the neck, and special joints that helped absorb impact. It was like nature had designed them for collisions. Even after years of fights, the domes rarely cracked. They grew harder, layer by layer, like living helmets. Some scientists believe they didn't always hit straight on. Instead, they might have rammed from the side or used quick swings to knock opponents off balance. That would explain why their necks were flexible and tails heavy, perfect for controlling movement after a hit. For the females and young, these fights were lessons. They watched closely. Every move showed them how power and control could live together. For Pachycephalosaurus, being strong didn't mean being violent. It meant being smart enough to know when to stop. When the dust settled, the winner stood tall, breathing heavily. Dome covered in scratches but unbroken. The herd accepted him without question. The new leader didn't roar or celebrate. He simply turned and walked forward. And the rest followed. When the battles ended, life returned to normal. Pachycephalosaurus was not always fighting. Most of its time was spent searching for food, protecting the herd, and teaching the young. It lived a quiet but disciplined life, a balance between strength and calm. This dinosaur was a plant eater. Its small leaf-shaped teeth were perfect for slicing through tough plants. It ate ferns, low bushes, and fruits that grew in the shade of the forests. Unlike some bigger herbivores, it didn't need massive amounts of food. It fed slowly, carefully choosing what to bite. It knew the best spots and remembered them. It was smart enough to follow seasonal growth. They often moved through open hills, not dense jungles. Their eyes were on the sides of their heads, giving them wide vision. That helped them spot predators early, raptors or even smaller tyrannosaurs. Whenever danger appeared, they didn't panic. The herd would tighten up, adults moving to the outside, young ones to the center. The leader gave a low grunt, a deep sound that spread through the group, and everyone froze. Silence could save lives. At sunset, when the air cooled, the herd gathered near trees or rocks. Some rested while others stood guard. Even then, they stayed close enough to touch each other's tails, a small sign of safety. They weren't affectionate like mammals, but they cared in their own way. If a young one strayed too far, adults would gently push it back with their heads. That thick dome wasn't just a weapon. It was a shield and a guide. Pachycephalosaurus had good memory. It remembered paths, water spots, and even safe caves for hiding during storms. That memory helped the herd survive, even when landscapes changed. The world around them wasn't easy. Floods, fires, or sudden cold could come at any time. But they adapted. They didn't fight nature. They moved with it. In this way, they lasted longer than many other dinosaurs of their time. They were proof that survival wasn't just about size or power. It was about strategy, patience, and unity. Time never stopped for the dinosaurs. Even the strong and smart ones, like Pachycephalosaurus, had to face the end of their age. It didn't happen in a single moment. It was a slow change that no one could fight. The weather grew colder. The air was filled with dust and ash from distant volcanoes. The plants they depended on started to die. Rivers dried and the forests turned thin and quiet. The herds moved farther every week, searching for food, but each season brought less and less. Predators became desperate, too. Raptors hunted in larger packs. Small tyrannosaurs attacked anything they could catch. Even when Pachycephalosaurus stood together, the danger was everywhere. They defended themselves bravely, but hunger was stronger than courage. Mothers tried to protect their young, leading them to valleys and rocky shelters. Some survived a few more years, the last generations of their kind. But the world they knew was collapsing. The sky changed color. Days grew shorter, colder, darker. Then came the Great Fire from the sky, an asteroid that ended almost all life. It struck far away, but the shock reached every part of Earth. Winds turned to storms, forests burned, oceans rose, and for the dome-headed guardians there was no escape. Their final days were not filled with panic, just silence. They stood together, as they always did, watching the dark clouds roll across the land. Millions of years later, their bones would be found, solid skulls still unbroken. Those skulls became messages from the past, reminders that even small creatures could carry great strength. Pachycephalosaurus lived with pride, fought with control, and faced the end without fear. It didn't roar or dominate like the T-Rex, it simply endured. And in that it became one of the quietest yet most powerful survivors in history. The age of dinosaurs may have ended, but the story of Pachycephalosaurus still echoes through time. Its bones, its battles, its quiet strength, all remind us that true power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands calm, protects, and endures. The dome-headed guardian lived with balance. It fought only when needed, led with respect, and vanished with dignity. And even now, millions of years later, its legacy remains, a symbol of discipline, courage, and unity. In the silence of museums beneath glass and light, those ancient skulls still whisper the same lesson. Strength is nothing without wisdom. The world may change, but the spirit of the Pachycephalosaurus will forever stand, unbroken, undefeated, and unforgettable.